We were just talking about fatigue, just events in general, virtual things.
Yeah,
There's a lot of it going around right now. So,
I know. We are just planning like API Days Helsinki for September, and all kinds of other things, and you can see that some people are really kind of getting tired. But we also wanted to like we learned in June event that, and when I've been into the other API Days and other things, so we learned that it's a very bad idea to have like just people talking to other people online, like just, the slide word and stuff. And so what we did in June, and it really worked well, was that we had like, the normal talks, but then we had a whole kind of Q&A session with the speakers after that, and people could ask and stuff, and that worked so much better. So it was kind of like unconferencing the normal conference type of thing.
I think that's healthy. I mean, that's kind of what we have to do here is find the right mix that works. Because I don't think the just moving things online, the event, the conference experience is
No,
is
no, it cannot be the same. And for example, like we were really thinking about how people kind of relate to other people. Like when they just see the speaker there, it's kind of like watching TV, even if the speaker is live. And we had first some recorded sessions because we were just trying out stuff, and then we came up with this idea that, hey, let's kind of just get the human there. Like let's ask something personal from the people first, the speakers, so that the audience can relate to them easier, and that sort of stuff. And it makes a difference. Like sometimes I have to say some kind of engineering type of people don't necessarily get that first. They have to kind of see that it works. But but in general,
yeah. I think developers have their head pointed to the human element sometimes and go,
yes,
hey, there's people here, relationships, connections. Welcome, Dave.
exactly.
Welcome, Dave.
I'm, cu- I'm curious on the data. I was involved in the Kong conference about a month ago, and then API Days New York, and I guess Singapore again
Yeah.
next week. I saw like API Days New York. They were more about making sure there were a few minutes for Q&A. Kong didn't do that. I think, and for Kong, their conference was usually much smaller, anyways. But it's been interesting to watch. And
Yeah,
has anyone
yeah.
been
We
following Google Next on Air, where like Google's trying their own thing? Google's thing though is like it's all pre-recorded, so there's no room for Q&A. I'm not sure if anyone's really like going to it in real time.
Yeah, I don't know, but like I was in the GraphQL summit in Twitch, and that was like super real life stuff, and people chatting in Twitch, and I was feeling so old. But so anyway, that kind of seemed to work pretty well. But what we kind of I was cooperating with API Days global team, and I was also in API Days interface in New York, and there was like a lot of the stuff that we did in Helsinki, because we intentionally had that as a first online event, because it was much smaller, of course, than the interface, and we were having all that tech and all that kind of online things tried out there. But so we learned a lot of the stuff that they could use in interface, but then also in interface we learned a lot of stuff that could be kind of done better in New York. And now we took stuff that was in New York that and tried to make it kind of better for Helsinki. And of course, Singapore is learning from that, and also Australia. So I don't know, stuff stuff hopefully gets better, but definitely the all online thing, which is like watching Netflix or something all day, which we totally do anyway. But I mean, it's not just the kind of the feeling of community that needs to be there. So
Yeah, I think events are gonna just keep being a top for this group as well. But I think just in general for organizations, events are pretty important. I think retooling them and learning is the key.
yeah, and also understanding what people actually did in the on-site events, because I remember spending a lot of time in the corridors and sitting on floors with people and having the best discussions ever, or in the lunch queue or
Yeah.
somewhere else. So kind of how to repeat that online.
Yeah, that's really really hard. Well, let's for the video folks, for the folks who are going to be joining us, just watching the video, let's kind of kick off a little bit formally so that they can tune in. This is the OpenAPI demand generation gathering every Friday, 8 a.m. Pacific time. We've been, I've been trying to find our footing as far as what format, what's the schedule. We're using GitHub. You can find it at OAI Demand Gen Home as this kind of central landing page for this discussion, and we're using GitHub issues for much of that discussion. Have a Google Doc with an agenda, a kind of loose agenda. Last week, thank you all. I think we need to make this a little bit more conversation, a little more interactive. So I'm gonna pull back from some of the work and just make sure we're discussing everything that's going on. And I think just continuing what was going on right now, let's check in. Who are we? What are we doing? Anything new? I mean, it sounds like events are top of mind. What's cooking, you guys? What are you feeling like? I mean, from OAI demand gen, but I think just from API demand gen, like how are we working these days? Is it primarily virtually online meetings?
So I think when it comes to events, I mean, maybe that this month there just happened to be a lot of events. It may also just be that's what we just started talking about before others started to join in. Because there's, I think, a lot of stuff that you've been talking about in these sessions that's of interest to the group. But yeah, I think something is going on where, and part of it may have been that API days. What I remember is API days had New York City, Singapore, all these other cities scattered throughout the year. And then when COVID hit, they postponed a bunch of them, hoping that would be a very short thing. And then we realized that it was going to be a longer thing to move everything online. But I think by postponing things until later in the year, that just meant that at this point we were starting to have this crunch of conferences simply because we didn't have conferences in the beginning of the year. But it's interesting to at least see the gatherings. People who were working on APIs who wanted to at least get into conversation. I think initially jumped into these conferences, and we'll see where they go. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's just I see the conferences are happening. I was asked to speak at a few of them, and now they're like all happening in a short period of time. But looking forward to seeing what goes on over there.
I'm finding I'm having fatigue with attending virtual events. I'm still speaking, I guess, at a few here and there. I'm finding more I don't know, more enthusiasm for kind of workshops and single smaller events and doing boot camps and workshops with people. I'm doing one later today for a group of students in Mexico City. So it's that kind of stuff that's getting me going.
Yeah,
I think, yeah, just Jeremy, continue.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, yes, I totally see the kind of a load of these conferences, and especially API Days conferences at the same time. And that was actually initially why I insisted that we kind of split Helsinki and we kept the June date, because I was seeing this kind of bunch of stuff happening early autumn, and I was afraid that kind of people would get tired, and let's see how that works. But I also see that there's a kind of a growing need for workshops for online and remote training and kind of smaller groups, and I'm also doing that now quite a lot. But also all the meetings are pretty much online, and the only thing I'm like, okay, there's like the fatigue of like online conferences in a certain format, but I'm also having this kind of home lag situation because a lot of them are happening and a lot of customer stuff and whatever is happening in US time zones. So it's kind of like bouncing around with all the time zones all the time and remotely. Is like that happened before, obviously, but it's kind of somehow it's like exploded now with COVID, like to kind of total new spheres. So that's an interesting thing to happen. But otherwise, I'm actually kind of enjoying it, and it really saves the time when you don't have to travel to anywhere, and people are kind of open to have these kind of global or kind of remotely located things and don't mind so much anymore where people actually physically are.
Agreed. You mentioned earlier missing the hallway conversations.
Mm.
I did a podcast yesterday with Provenix, and they're they're people I see all over the world when I traveled, and I drank with in lots of bars and eaten at lots of restaurants. But it was the first time I feel like I made a good virtual connection, but it really required previous physical
Yeah.
relationships to exist to kind of find it, in this podcast format. So, um,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's now much easier to operate with people who you have met in whatever some conference or another, or in some context, of course. But like, it's also easier to connect with them or reconnect with them now online, which you might not have done unless this situation was kind of coming. So that's also an interesting thing.
yeah,
But we have new people here, so
yeah. Kurt joined us. Hey, Kurt, good to see you, my friend. Welcome.
What's up, Ken? How you doing?
Doing all right.
Hey, everybody.
I'm a little tired this week, but it's good. Just keeping busy, keeping those Zoom calls going, and trying to move some other balls forward as well. So
You've got an intense mic set up there, man. I'm kind of jealous right now.
yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's we've got a production team at Postman that is like, yeah, your videos are good, but they could be better. And here you go, and it showed up in the mail, and I got all set up, so I like it. It's good. I'd say the headphones are a little disorienting for me sometimes, but it's good.
Nice.
So events. I think events are top of mind. Am I not sharing my screen? Am I sharing?
No, you're not.
yeah,
No.
you're not
Yet.
yeah. But otherwise, the how are API things? I know with Dave we talked last time after the official stuff. We talked some OpenAPI related ideas, but
Yeah. Um, I have the simultaneous calls with the API specifications conference and I'm also involved in, we're trying to figure out for Postman, what do we do? And then, I just mentioned I'm doing, I'm finding my rhythm in workshops and just talking to small audiences. And so, I feel like kind of going to our agenda here, ideas, education being the top of mind. I think that overlap with events, I'm finding more valuable. The workshop portion of events, the individual one-off events, and I really want to do more of these for OpenAPI, and I specifically kind of out of this 9 to 10 o'clock, I've been just kind of rolling in different people coming in to talk about just basics of OpenAPI, and I should change that. And Swagger to OpenAPI, because I know, like, I have a lot of enterprise organizations who just don't understand OpenAPI and just don't really get the difference between Swagger to OpenAPI. And so I'd love to hear your guys' ideas on the offshoot of events, like workshops for demand generation, just educating people. How are you guys feeling? I know the OAI is working on something, but we talked about certification, kind of the end goal, but what about some immediate steps? Is there ways that we can inject into all these virtual events that are going on more or not, just as part of a looser schedule, open API trainings, is there an appetite out there for it? What do you guys think?
In general, you're talking about, is there an appetite out there for OpenAPI trainings, or specific? I mean, having to do with specific industries, possibly.
Either or. I'll just say, do people want to learn about it, or do they just want it to fix their life and fix their world? Is there not? Do you guys find there's not much of an appetite to actually be educated on it?
I'm personally seeing more just demand for education for APIs in general, and whenever teaching APIs, I assume to direct people to OpenAPI. So I think the demand is there, and I kind of agree with your general idea of possibly when it comes to conferences, not transitioning more to workshops, but including something more in the area of workshops. Maybe that takes an initiative. Like when I'm looking at what you've created on GitHub, there are many, many initiatives we can participate in. I think what you have here are people who are happy to start helping. We may not know where to start, but it could be, if it's one or two initiatives like what you seem to have on the agenda for today, that we can discuss those, maybe start to see if we can join in and help out. But I would first assume that there's demand for open API education in general, and moving beyond just the lectures of how to use APIs, and said, let's get into maybe a workshop to better actually tactically work on open API.
I would say that there's like people who should know about OpenAPI don't know that they should know about OpenAPI. So in that sense, there is like not directly demand for it as much as there could be. But I agree with Jeremy that I'm seeing this when I'm training API, so API related things. I always include kind of when talking about REST, GraphQL and whatever, but also talking about the standards of how APIs should and could be done, and why the standards and best practices are important, because sometimes you see also kind of the budding interest being killed by this kind of like, well, you have to use standards and you have to use this and that, and you have to do an open API spec, but nobody tells you why you have to do it. What's the real deal with it? And developers are kind of smart people, so if you don't tell them why, they don't really care. But if they see the point of it, they start caring. So for example, there's definitely a group of people who enjoy and need kind of the how to craft an open API spec by hand, and like how to understand all the different kind of governance and compliance and standardization points of it. But then there's a bunch of people who, like mainly hands-on developers, who just need to know why you shouldn't screw up how you generate open API from your code, because you are definitely going to generate it from your code no matter what anyone says. Because that's just the easier thing for you in your framework. So, and to that note, for example, Postman, I have to mention this because Postman tool is of course genius. We all know it. But what happens is that a lot of people who used to use Postman were product managers or testers or people who didn't necessarily know how to code or know how to do test automation or something like that. So there were a lot of features that people were missing out. And it's the same thing that if you don't know what you're supposed to know, and your kind of tool chain and your process is very specific, then you need to be taught the whole thing from that perspective, and then you will get it. Then you will kind of have that demand.
So go ahead, Kurt. It looks like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I was. Thanks. I was just about to say. Yeah, I agree, but I almost completely agree with everything you said there. I think though that I think there needs to be a demand generation step before we run straight to offering training. All right, so like. Yeah,
that was exactly the point I was kind of making.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the next evolution of where you were going with that.
Yeah.
From a marketing standpoint, if we look at the user acquisition funnel, there's still an awareness issue before an acquisition issue. And I think maybe we're all seeing that. Like I've seen that frequently among companies where everyone gets very excited about building APIs. The engineers want to dive in, but if they haven't looked around, if they haven't done it before, they're not jumping right into OpenAPI. So they're going to start building an API. They're often not going to make it fully RESTful either, even though OpenAPI is just right there to make it easy for them.
So I'm hearing that we should be teaching API and API lifecycle and helping people find or come in the door through whatever way they need to make sense of it in their world. If they need to understand it for docs, I mean, this is, I would say, kind of the original doorway for Swagger and Swagger UI, and most people still think Swagger or OpenAPI is for docs. So training and workshops should be catered to like solving people's problems rather than just talking about OpenAPI, because not many people are going to care at the same level we do. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly the point.
Yeah.
This may come to more than conference talks then. And what happens to create that general awareness of what OpenAPI is beyond documentation?
Well, I mean, I think we could, I think you could, and this is just a crappy example, I think, but, mini 15, 20-second videos that get posted on Twitter to kind of explain, short concepts and quick whys about why OpenAPI is good, right? Or why you should pay attention to it. And then, spam is the wrong word, but spam a few hashtags and start to get the stuff out there. And especially, at least among the junior developers, that kind of conversation will probably kick off. The senior developers generally already know about OpenAPI, and then it's just a matter of trying to make them aware of how it helps their life, as opposed to telling them that OpenAPI exists.
Yeah, and they're usually, they either know it exists, but they are not sure how to use it correctly.
Yeah.
Or they generally don't, like, depending on what their background is, they might not even know that it exists. I've seen a lot of that too, but because there are seniors and architects who have like a strong background in integration or in, server-side stuff or front-end stuff or enterprise architecture stuff, and there are totally different kind of perception of what is the role of OpenAPI, or is there even such a thing as OpenAPI? So
I think
but I really like your idea about the Twitter on the videos. It could go viral.
Yeah, I think it's a good start, and it may help to write up the personas and the channels to reach them. Something I appreciated, and among the most successful APIs, I've looked at Stripe. Being in the fintech world, Stripe understood that the way people would sign up for Stripe was first a company would need a payment solution. They would go to the developers to figure it out. The developers would stumble upon Stripe first, and Stripe understood this, so they designed their website highlighting the API reference, highlighting what you can do in solutions, explaining what you can do with Stripe, but letting the viewers go straight to the API reference, knowing that it was developers coming in first. They need a little bit of info, and they want to just look at what this thing was. And then once the engineers recommend it, the business folk would come in and say, what's this going to cost us? There would also be calls to action to view pricing. Now, it's not to copy what Stripe is doing, but my point is that Stripe really thought through that they had different personas. At other fintech companies where I've worked or supported, APIs are there. They may even be APIs first, but they understand that for them, the business folk come first, and then the developers come second. So the call to action to the API may not be as prominent, but it's actually still important to do it that way, to let the business folk come in first, and then make sure that when the developers come, they see the API reference. Now, in our case, I would assume it's really just the developers are the ones who are going to look at OpenAPI. When you need to implement an API, the engineers are going to look at it first. It's not like the business folk are going to come in and say, we need to use OpenAPI. Engineering needs to stumble upon this and say, this is the right solution. And I would then ask, why are they not doing that sometimes? And what channels can work? Twitter may be one channel. I've been more involved in Quora, where I frequently see, what's the difference between Swagger and OpenAPI. Anything on like Stack Exchange, are there other channels? But first and foremost, I'm jumping ahead here. Do we want to segment the personas by junior developers, by senior developers, by other categories of developers? and then ask, what channels are good channels to reach them? If Twitter, which accounts on Twitter? If other channels, what are those other channels?
Yeah, I agree with that, because also we shouldn't forget the other people than developers, because often it is the kind of architects, the product managers, somebody who's kind of owning the system, owning the developer experience, and also the customer experience, who is actually more interested in how the stuff is documented, which, even though it's not the only thing to care for, is of course one of the visible things to care for, which then, if they demand the team that, hey, you need to do this, and also these developers then understand the points why it's beneficial for them too, then kind of things get moving. and then kind of taking that and doing, is it Twitter, is it Twitch, is it something else? Because of course, like, the junior developers especially are in Discord and in Twitch, and not in, old people social media. But kind of this comes down to the whole persona stuff, and this is really like what I'm all for, because service design and design thinking combined with APIs is kind of the thing that I live and breathe. So if people are on board with this approach, I'm really for it.
And no need for age discrimination. At one company I was at, the biggest advocate for more structured approach to APIs was an engineer who I didn't know his age, but I knew he was over 70.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But just as a little bit of a generalization on the channels, because there we can see a little bit maybe a kind of a generation thing, but not, of course, regarding actual age.
So I heard a couple things here that are kind of new that I'm going to get reflected in the idea list is, so the little videos, little small 20, 30-second videos on Twitter, on YouTube, and then the kind of also the Q&A. So I would see those as Q&A. Those are like, hey, let's just answer one simple question. How do I do this with OpenAPI? How do I do this? Or how do I do this with APIs? It doesn't even have to be OpenAPI. And then Quora, Stack Overflow, and then I would say Twitch is a version of that. How we could either fill a Twitch session with many of these questions, and then maybe like queue them up and then answer them in real time, and then take those videos and splice them up. We started a Twitch channel at Postman, and I felt very seen when you were just talking about ages. It's definitely the younger Devrel are championing that, and I totally get it. And I've been giving it the backing, but it's definitely not my primary channel choice, but it's growing on me. So if we had, like, I would say, because I'm always trying to take these big ideas. Like, I know this group is having trouble like understanding how do we move some of these balls forward. And if we can break them down into smaller bits and bytes and chunks and tasks, that if we had a list of questions and then people could step up and answer those either via video or I guess we could start mining Quora and Stack Overflow for questions that already exist, answer them, and then answer them there, and then answer them maybe in a video format. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and I think that some of those questions might be a great thing to kind of take here into these office hours, because some of them might be something that actually needs discussion, because there are some things that wouldn't have a kind of an easy answer, or are a matter of opinion or a matter of experience from some specific field. Like, let's say that OpenAPI to healthcare is like, well, it's kind of doable and there are ways to do it, but there are also kind of different experiences on that. So that those things might need a little bit discussion, but that could also be something to take over and discuss here, or kind of get the answers, but still remaining very kind of ad hoc and viral on who and how produces, for example, those videos or answers those questions.
I think it would give the forum where anybody could step up and answer a question with a short little video, and then do it in their style, in their way, and we we could actually probably measure the response to that. Was it well received? So yeah, interesting.
I would also I would also uh, another potential idea is I have found lately that there are that the questions that have that provide the most, the answers to which provide the most value are the ones that generally come from beginners, right? And when I see answers to questions that a junior developer has asked, um, I can tell you about half of the time that I read the answers, even though I've been coding for like God knows how long at this point in time, I still learn something. Um, but when I see questions that senior developers ask, um, they're so specific and tied to it's so specific and oftentimes situational that it I don't get as much value out of those answers rather. Um, so one thing I think I would push us to do is probably take more questions from junior developers, because generally speaking, their questions apply more generally, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I agree. From an educational point of view, also there's the fact that the newbies, they don't know the kind of the lingo. They
Yeah.
will ask in very strange ways sometimes, or roundabout ways, or things that we kind of don't necessarily think, who know more stuff or think they know more stuff. We don't think that this has any relationship to this topic, but actually it does when you start thinking about it from their point of view. And the whole point of learning should be kind of cognitive dissonance. So to kind of make their really kind of make them really bang their heads on the kind of, hey, I thought about this in a one way, and actually it's in another way. And the best thing is if we can get ourselves into this cognitive dissonance moment, because then we can probably, change a lot of people's minds on this topic. So I agree.
This is really interesting. I would say the newbie question, like, so I'm doing group of students this afternoon, and that's precisely why I keep going into these classrooms and doing, like, 8 people, 10 people classrooms, is those questions that you said, Kurt. And I think these are the questions we should be tuning into and aggregating and answering and making easier to find answers to, and formalizing is part of when we get to the point where we're like, hey, this is API education or open API education.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's kind of think about even the simplest question, which is what is OpenAPI? I mean,
Or
it's kind of an obvious question, but how simple is that to answer, really?
well, and what is an API, and how
Yeah.
does OpenAPI help you answer that
Well, if the
question?
goal is to clarify that API is, sorry, I had to freeze up. I wasn't sure if I was interrupting anyone,
You're
but
fine.
the goal is to say that the goal of OpenAPI is often perceived as, a nice way of creating documentation, whereas really the goal of OpenAPI is, and I'm actually curious, Ken, how you define it. For me, I just see it as a way of directing more consistent development of an API, creating more consistency across APIs and better APIs, but means of making it easier to both design, implement, launch, and maintain your APIs.
Yeah, that is, I think, a very important view of this question, because for me, most people answer, what is OpenAPI? Oh, it's documentation. It's not even a specification. That's most of the answers I get from people. And for me, the process of creating an open API stabilizes your own internal definition of what is an API. So just going through the process of creating an open API helps you think through what is an API in more standardized, shared, common terms. So an open API very much is how you define, describe, share, communicate, and develop around a common notion, a shared understanding of what an API is.
Yeah, I think like in one word, it's a contract between people. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like if you have the open API definition of an API, then everybody is supposed to know kind of as much as possible how that API works, is secured, what it does, and why it's there. Of course, what we see in the nature is that we see a lot of very poorly defined open API specs. I mean, like you only have some stuff about the endpoint, like you have URLs and you have no description of what this API actually is about, and you don't have the security defined, or you have like no status code and stuff. And that I think also skews people's idea about what is open API for, because they only see the limited scope of it being used.
So I like one thing you said. You said it's a contract between people, which I don't think people tend to view it as between people. It's between systems or between applications in a back-end system. But I think it's what you said it is. So how do we? I guess our challenge is how do we get people to realize that?
I'd say like there's the what to teach, and there's also the what channels. Like I remember at the conference, there was a good amount of how with OpenAPI you can basically OpenAPI and CI/CD, you can automate so many things. A lot of it was for the engineers. I had a talk that was more for the product managers to say, if you're designing your APIs, you take an API product lifecycle, how OpenAPI allows better APIs to be designed and implemented in the first place. But then also it goes back to who you targeting, how are you pitching it, and then also what are your channels. I may be going off topic by going straight into if you're bringing these up at conferences. At the conferences, people are at least already aware of OpenAPI. It may be they don't have the same perception, and so you can change the perception over there. But there's already a lot of awareness if they're already attending the conferences. Something I'm curious about, though, is if we look at much of the content that was there, maybe it was a little bit more tactical, not enough of the higher level evangelism of this really is the purpose of OpenAPI. But also, what can we use beyond, say, the conferences? I think we can actually use a lot of content that people have created for conferences and then use them actually outside of conferences. Like maybe those short videos on YouTube, maybe some of the diagrams created for these presentations can go into popular blogs, and maybe not just the API blogs. Sorry if I'm jumping off topic here.
No.
I would like to compliment what you're saying here is that the idea of packaging this into a cohesive set of material, even possibly an online course, is a good objective to look toward. This is James Jonas. The second thing is what's powerful about videos I find is that you have kind of real world metrics. Who actually you may not find out who, because sometimes that's not revealed, which would go toward identifying the specific personas that Jeremy spoke of. But you can see within a video how many people pick it up. You can see what the video starts to fall off in terms of interest. But I think that the idea of micro courses of some type that going toward and repackaging this in terms of different types of formats that may very well be consumables in different forums, and would also allow for your levels, you to be able to scale. Often you have a situation where all the folks here have only so many hours, so much time in order to present, but moving toward a video format will allow for that to take place.
I want to add a comment to the previous discussion about how open APIs are not just for systems, but they're for people. I think an important aspect of OpenAPI is just the notion of API discovery. Prior to OpenAPI or having this format and the kind of tools and processes around it, I often saw people documenting APIs with Word documents, and then they would then format as PDFs and things like that. And basically what happened was there was no good structure for sharing and publishing APIs. It made it hard for companies to discover what APIs they actually had available inside their organization. And with OpenAPI, it doesn't require it, but it certainly encourages a standard way of managing your APIs, gives you a place to document them, and then once you have a place to document them, you also have a place to publish them, and that helps enable discovery. And so that gets to the human consumption of the APIs, making it easier for people to discover what APIs are available, and having them described in the same format makes it easier to understand what those APIs actually do and what they don't do. So people can then start using those APIs. So I think that would be one thing to look at for, promoting APIs is simply using the format and then the tooling around it as a way of enhancing their visibility.
Yeah, that's exactly like the point that when I'm, for example, teaching courses or online or wherever, but the kind of API management, for example, a lot of companies want to take on API management tools or API testing or something. And if you don't have OpenAPI aspects and you have REST APIs, GraphQL, of course, is another thing, and those others. But if you don't have the OpenAPI files there, then it becomes just so much more troublesome to get the kind of API ops working and to really get the automation. And this is actually something related to what we talked with Dave after last time. I don't know what he wants to tell others about it yet, but let's say that that's also the human factor, and the whole API ops lifecycle and the automation there is the reason why I was doing the API ops cycles method originally, because to get everybody to understand that this is why you should be doing the API, the OpenAPI file first, for example, is that you can then publish it in your API management tool or give it to your testers, and they can make the test automation on it, or the UI developers who can even generate the UI or code the UI on it. And you can kind of publish that as a prototype, and then you're off in your development with multiple teams and partners and whatever, without really coding a line. And this is something which is kind of, it may seem obvious to all of us right now in here, but it's certainly not obvious to everybody else.
So you said without coding a line that you can do this. So
yeah,
I like a lot of that where it's, introducing people to the why and hows of OpenAPI through kind of the life cycle stuff that matters to them. So it's, you want docs, here, learn about it. You want code gen, learn about this. One of the frictions I've learned from developers or received from developers, this is at scale in enterprise organizations, is they say, well, I'm a coder, I'm not a templater. And you're basically telling me my job is now that I've got to spend a lot of time just coding or just templating and writing YAML. And so you're challenging their existence and you're challenging their being. And I don't have good answers to this, but
I have the one good answer, which of course you could debate, but that's exactly what I was talking about, the persona. So it doesn't need to be at that stage even a developer who does that. I've been teaching a lot of product managers, project managers, all kinds of people, kind of like I even taught retail hardware store cash people, register people to use Postman, because that was the most convenient thing to do. But I mean, who says that exactly that prototype of an OpenAPI needs to be written by developers? Seriously, or at least those developers who would actually write the code. But sometimes in some frameworks you can also stub a lot of stuff and generate the OpenAPI from there, and that's fine, but you're still writing like the absolutely minimum amount of code.
I actually, I've been teaching product management courses for almost 5 years now, and I've been asked to create courses. I teach workshops just on API product management, where it's about training product managers to work on APIs. And it is interesting to see a different angle if you have even developer advocates, tech writers, once they understand the fundamentals of the API design, sometimes they also come at it from a different angle, where they focus on writing the OpenAPI schema first, and then wanting to build the API from there. In fact, so part of it is the personas. Part of it can actually be the tooling as well. And I know, Kim, you're creating a list of the open source tooling. Because I've seen a habit where sometimes the engineers want to write the OpenAPI plans out first and then code to that. Other times, because among the first tools we've had for OpenAPI back before OpenAPI, when it was just Swagger, was to auto-generate a schema off of the code. But what that often encouraged was coding the API first and then actually creating the schema, which is just going to be used to create documentation, if that's the perception. In fact, in one of my talks, I advocate if you go differently and you want to design the API first and then implement it off of OpenAPI, here are the tools to help you do that. There's the IDE. There are additional tools to consider for the IDE. I hacked together something where if you just create the model definitions, since in most cases for REST, the endpoints are a kind of a pattern of CRUD operations, you can auto-generate many of the functions themselves. So there are tools out there to actually help you create your OpenAPI schema even faster than having to write everything. And there are those tools to create, in addition to client-side SDKs, the server-side code stubs, but there's often a limitation in the server-side code stubs in that they just take your OpenAPI schema and do what they can. Very often you have a backend database, a backend code, and then you define your OpenAPI schema. Then I've actually advocated, I've conceptualized, but I haven't seen this build, something where you're basically mapping the OpenAPI spec to your database schema, so you can actually auto-generate server-side code that actually fits better with your existing code base. That's a tool that's more conceptualized, but I've hypothesized if you have those kind of tools, there's a lot right now to automate OpenAPI. But a lot of it also is designed even on the assumption that you've coded the API first. Whereas if you go through it and say we're designing the API first with OpenAPI and then implementing, what other tools can we highlight to say here's a tech stack? I actually have a diagram in a talk for a tech stack, but admittedly there are some gaps there. So there's this advocate can you use to make it easier, noting there are some things you may even want to work on to make it even easier if you're going to design on the OpenAPI and not just use OpenAPI for documentation.
Yeah.
And that is then also taught to not just engineers. It can teach engineers to not just code first, but also help non-engineers get involved.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And for example, Mermaid and other things. I mean, there are not so many good tools for that product management point of view, but exactly that's what I found too. And also there's the problem of those server-side generated things from database, because they tend to promote these kind of crude style things where you don't need to actually think about anything. You just, blob out an API and then all hell loose. But these are, I think, examples of the advanced topics also. Like, I mean, they can be very newbie topics and newbie questions in one way, but then they result into kind of a more advanced set of questions of like, yes, you can do this, but should you do this? And what if you do this, then what happens? And also that kind of brings me to the point of we should probably also consider the kind of situations where OpenAPI doesn't yet work or has issues. Like, for example, if you have a very dynamic kind of schema and it depends on different things. I mean, there are just situations where OpenAPI doesn't really support you well, and those should also be kind of understood and discussed in some way with these questions or otherwise, and they will probably come up also as questions.
You actually brought up a good example, because when I bring up the idea of generating the server-side code stubs from OpenAPI, what people often think is, well, have you seen those tools that let you generate, open API from a database schema, and from there give you your APIs right on top of the database schema? And then I have to follow up by saying, well, yeah, I mean that kind of tool has been out there for a while, but that's encouraging people to just build APIs off of your database instead of designing external APIs based on external use cases. So often there's still that challenge, and many of the tools are assuming you're just taking your internal stuff and making your API very easily, as opposed to let's design the APIs well. How do we better automate that? Because the tool that I was advocating was kind of the reverse, saying you design your open API first. We know you have a database schema, so you can utilize that. And then we're going to generate some server-side code, but the server-side code isn't just to auto-generate an API off your database. It's to generate an API off of your open API design.
Yeah, and that question actually then transforms itself to the world of GraphQL too, which might be for some people more, like right now more relevant even than OpenAPI, because that's what is happening in the world of GraphQL a lot, and people think it's a good idea to do that. And so that kind of is also a bridging question or bridging topic to kind of that world, which I think is important, because otherwise people might see this just a kind of an old-fashioned restish, like there used to be these soap discussions, and now there's this kind of old-fashioned rest discussion. So to kind of keep the whole discussion relevant, I'm sorry to say that, but that is something that some people are starting to think about, while the same things still pop up with the GraphQL stuff anyway.
It's okay. I think all of us on this call know that we're dinosaurs talking about rest.
Well, I really liked Twitter's response. There was to their recent launch. Why didn't they go with V2 with GraphQL? Which is the standard. And he said, we did. It's just internal. The front end is all a RESTful design of an API because we have a wider audience than would get the GraphQL. And I thought that was one of the better answers I've seen.
Yeah.
But I do want to do more storytelling and outreach about GraphQL as part of this group, because I'm determined to make it a conversation about REST and GraphQL, not REST versus GraphQL. And this has been my biggest beef with the GraphQL community publicly. And they all think I hate GraphQL. But I hate the way they're marketing it as adversarially, and so I'm gonna do a campaign this fall in conjunction with GitHub around OpenAPI and GraphQL, and make sure that we're telling both stories equally, and talk about when one's good, when one's bad, the pros and cons, and all of that. One thing out of the thread you guys were just saying I would like to touch on a little bit is did you guys see the IBM comment parser that came out in the last couple of weeks? It was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I watched the Swagger hashtag, I watched OpenAPI hashtag, I watched API General on Twitter, and they owned it. Like it's just been a constant stream, and part of it's because there was the IBM PR machine behind it. But then there's also the IBMers. They're kind of a cult following sometimes when it comes to retweeting. But it's just taking the comments and generating OpenAPI for the sake of documentation. But it resonates with so many people still that's how you do it, and it's going to be a tough paradigm to shift.
Sorry, I'm actually just reading about this OpenAPI comment parser you just mentioned. I find that intriguing, but it's only intriguing for people who actually do a decent job of commenting.
I see, like, this is a women's perspective, but I see it like a morning after pill. I'm sorry. Because...
Oh my God.
I mean, I love the IBMers, I truly do, but in this particular case, the concept is kind of in that.
Oh man, that needs to be yeah. I don't want to go after IBM with it, but that needs to be an ad campaign right there. That's maybe code gen, or maybe we just position it as Open API generation from code is the morning after pill. I think that's a good.
Yeah, I think that would work.
Oh man. Oh, if we got
Oh my
nothing
God.
else out of today, I think that's the high point right there. Thank you.
I
But this
completely
is why
agree.
diversity is important, you know.
Amen. Oh man, I gotta write this down.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but one guy actually tweeted just recently about him kind of being the proud father of a first GraphQL API, and I had to go there with with that tweet because well, whatever.
I like
So
it. Um, so I'm gonna be staying on this thread here, but normal the usual hours is eight, or this hour here is just for kind of Open API demand gen. The next hour has always been people coming with Open API 101 and swaggered Open API discussions. Last week I did a one-on-one session with Twitter during that time, but now I'm just going to leave it open, the same thread, that we can continue this conversation. You guys want to stick around, but I'm also just I'm gonna stay on this channel for the next hour, and then keep inviting people from different companies to come ask questions and stuff, because Twitter's really keen on using their Open API to kind of guide their journey now, and we're working on some mock stuff there. I didn't get it in to this slot, but I had yesterday a call with Dropbox, who is getting all on Open API and managing their life cycle, but they're switching, which makes for a great story. But they've always done their APIs in Stone, so they have an open source API specification language called Stone, and they've literally written their API definitions for the last decade in Stone, and they're switching from Stone to Open API, which I think makes for a great story. But
Yeah.
so you're all welcome to stay on, and we can keep talking. Is all I'm saying. So
I think that it would be maybe worth discussing kind of how to get this great idea of videos and stuff going on. Just a kind of, shall we just start doing it, or
it's one of, yes, that's my style. You just start doing it. So I would like to.
I got to take off, guys.
Okay.
Have a good one. Sorry to interrupt.
Good to see you,
Great
Kurt.
to see you guys.
Yep.
Thank you for the morning after pill.
Yes.
Love it.
Thank you. Have a good
my
one.
pleasure.
Enjoy your weekend.
I'll have to drop
Talk
off.
to you guys next week.
Okay. Bye, Jeremy.
I'm gonna drop off too. It's great seeing you all.
Yeah. Thanks,
Yep.
See you
Jeremy.
till next time.
Y'all have a great
Take care.
weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend.
Bye.
So
And hey, this is Dave. I just
Yeah.
want to say I've been listening the entire time, and that was highly entertaining, so and informative.
oh, good.
So thanks very much for that.
Yeah.
I just
Well, thank you to Maruka for kind of shifting the balance last week, I think, and pushing me to make this more conversational and kind of step back, because I think that's what we needed this week. So thank you.
I think it went well, and it will probably be even better when we get the hang of it. So I think this feels like a good direction. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm here
And,
for.
and I'd also like to chime in and says I thought this was a very productive discussion. Not that the work that you were showing before was not excellent, but just to say in terms of the quality of the people that you have at the table here is pretty amazing. And I am very hopeful. And I also really like the idea of you moving forward with regard to the video concepts or video yets or whatever you wish to call them. That's real powerful.
Well, I mean, I'm so used to just moving forward on my own momentum as API evangelist. I tend to bury a lot of voices just because I'm moving so fast. So I'm really appreciative that I have strong voices like you guys to help slow me down and listen and think. So, so to the video idea, so kind of video Q&A. So this is something I would like to just run with. I would like to fire up its own repo, get a README, start grabbing a list of questions. I think rather than me just asking questions that I think, because it's the problem that was said that I'm a senior developer, I'm not going to have as good questions, or mine are going to be too focused or precise. how do we harvest questions from Stack Overflow, Quora, and other places in Twitter, add them to a list, and then start crowdsourcing amongst this group. But then I would say part of this demand gen is I would actually start asking, this may dovetail with the kind of people directory that I'm building, is as a question comes in a specific category, I go, oh, Arnaud is great for that, or Mike Ralston's great for that, or Maruka's great for that, or hey, it's a financial one, Dave, BSAC would be great for that. So how do any other ideas for how we could just jumpstart this and do it?
I think what we could do, and I can devote like a few hours, for example, to the sourcing part from kind of for the first questions. But what we could do is that we could use the GitHub, like the wiki feature or the issues, just to kind of get those questions there.
Yeah, I like the GitHub
Yeah.
issues for that. I think if we could all crowdsource them and then add them as issues,
Yeah.
and then tag and label and then take those and build lists from those, that's great.
Yeah, because then it would be really easy to say like, hey, I'm doing a video on this, or I'm answering this here, and then other people could comment that, and then we can like first decide if there's kind of, do we have any kind of process for putting them out, or do we just kind of start putting them out and just have a hashtag, which then leads to the whole point of probably then others will start using, like doing that too.
Yeah.
Which is possibly a totally good thing, because then we could still kind of do some curating on the results kind of in these discussions, because sometimes of course it will go, to some direction and then we might want to kind of sometimes kind of start directing the discussion to some other direction, or kind of make some more curated answers if it feels like it. But if everything just starts going fine, then it, of course, it can just start flying and we can just amplify it. So
I think the approach of chaos first and curate later is great, and see if you get to the point where you start to iterate and understand a couple things. First of all, I see a lot of depth of skill in terms of training, and some of you folks may be naturals in terms of being able to do a good video. Other folks are going to be a little bit challenged by it. So I would probably, because when you start to build a video portfolio, there's like a long list of questions that pop up, and you really don't understand those questions until you're actually in the midst of the chaos. One thing is do you curate it toward a Q&A or curate it toward a course structure? Which video editing tool do you want to do so you are able to go and reuse those components? And that becomes non-trivial, because you want to start to create reusable assets and templates again and again for the video production. Do you want to get down to the detail? For example, when I produce a video where I create with shot list, which is kind of a high-level video issue when you're doing video production, but a lot of people don't realize that later on that they need to go ahead and think about how they're going to put together the presentation. And those things kind of bubble up from the process. And so I think this idea of iterative develop, chaos first, iterate up, and then start to develop your talent pool as to what you need to do. I do have a little bit of video editing behind me, not a lot, but I could help out a little bit there. But this overall process of what you want to communicate kind of will come from it as you start to discover what works. And back to the use of metrics, always think about what you can use in terms of measuring success for a particular video. You may find out that certain questions get a lot of interest where others don't. I would suspect, for example, an introduction to OpenAPI would be very, very welcome, but there's so many sub-communities within the API area that as they start to bubble up, you may find out that there's a lot of excitement on a specific topic, and you want to be able to go and throw the atomic elements together quickly into the soup, the goulash, and cook it up fast and kick it out. And that might just be, a quick response to something happens within a conference or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the whole question of like I think that we can all whip up a few videos, even quite pro quality videos, if that is what we want to do. Then again, there's the question of do we just kind of get everybody on board who wants to be on board, and we just need to probably do a little bit of hard work first, and then it might start bubbling. But then the most important thing would be like that in each of the videos there's like the same hashtag mentioned or something that kind of makes them a series, even if they actually aren't made as a series and don't necessarily look the same. That's one approach, and that's kind of like total chaos approach versus like a very organized approach. But I think that we could just start trying to collect like 10 first questions and then go out there and see what happens with those, and decide on a hashtag and then distribute them from like our own and whatever, Twitter and social media channels. And first, for example, Twitter, and start that going out. Then we would be able to see at least what happens. And then it would kind of, I think that because we are all in a lack of time and we have all so many other things to do. So as minimal effort that it is to make decent enough video to kind of get the topic across would probably be one approach here, as long as they are decent enough that people actually want to watch them. But still.
So to get down to a slight, just a tad level more in the detail. Have an opening screen, which is a video introduction. Have a closing screen that's consistent video introduction. Frame it properly. The quality will come over time. You have to handle certain contractual issues because anytime you have a person who's presenting, IP has to be really clear. So there needs to be a release form.
Of course. Yeah.
Which form? I have a couple of these flying around, or I can find you the generic release forms. These are just particulars of any time you do a video production, in term for somebody who wants, the background stuff. What I do see though is really strong and knowledgeable personalities that you have there. But I don't include myself in that list in terms of expertise in this domain. I think I believe in the effort. It's kind of like I'll hold your hats and carry some water.
So I really like the chaos first and then iterate up from there, because I think long term this could become, the videos themselves could be passed off to a production team that could polish them with the same authors and person who was originally in them. But getting them out, getting people doing this, getting many diverse voices, many diverse topics, evolving the taxonomy over time so that the hashtag evolves. So like you said, it's not just, hey, here's the central hashtag. It's actually like, I added design, I added this. So like it actually provides more of a breadcrumb trail. I think all of these could eventually become the curriculum, and we just kind of proved it out in the open space.
Yeah.
Well, the only hashtag you need is if we're talking about OpenAPI, is hashtag OpenAPI.
Yeah.
As for everything else, perceive them as being tags, and you'll evolve that taxonomy over time. Just like for example, you put together a taxonomy in your documents.
No.
You don't necessarily have to be as structured because tags have a form over time.
Yeah, I didn't mean that, but I meant that kind of just to have the kind of one hashtag that we know we are putting into those videos, so that we know kind of who's tweeting what where, for example, because we just want to monitor that, hey, where's this message going? And so I would choose some, like, even if it's as kind of stupid or lame or like OpenAPI, I demand again. I mean, I wouldn't maybe do that,
Yeah,
but
that's kind of boring.
but just the idea that there's something there that can be kind of followed beyond the OpenAPI hashtag only, which could of course be and should be included there.
So what about
Jay concur? I agree.
What about OpenAPI TV or OpenAPI Q&A? What do you guys think?
OpenAPI TV is quite funny because that could kind of really kind of be something that people would stop like, what the hell is this? So I kind of like it.
I like.
Yeah, I kind of like the Open API TV. That is a domain name. Check your IP on it. So
Yeah.
just do a
Yeah.
Yeah.
quick check, see if anybody grabbed that particular one. But I would suspect because you represent do you have a legal representation of Open API? Because that isn't that a trademarked marked item, so it should be protected. And do you have rights to be able to use that,
Yeah.
or is it even necessary? I don't know.
I'll bring it
This
up.
is like,
I'll bring it up in the group.
you may just have to ask the question, say, hey, we're going to be doing a couple videos in this area. I'm going to be using OpenAPI. I don't even know if you have to ask because you actually already have
Yep.
that ability to do that.
Yeah.
Because you're the evangelist, and this falls underneath your umbrella of evangelism.
Yep.
But anyway, the concept of TV or education or class or course, you could flip around with a couple of things. The key driver here is what naturals would complement the word Open API. So, and I don't know what that is. What's
I wouldn't kind of brand it on the class or course because there's a kind of it may direct people's minds to something that it's not yet or it's not kind of supposed to really be, even though it is about education, but it's kind of sometimes people don't want to be educated. They want to be entertained and then educated because of that. So I would kind of the idea of like the TV or something like that kind of resonates in that sense that it's something that people understand that, hey, this is something to watch and something to monitor and hey, this might be cool and they might learn from it and it would be like truly micro learning approach to it. But if you call it something which has like class or course or education, it might kind of, be perceived more as a kind of commercial about the course or something like that.
Yeah.
So the point she's making is actually a very good point. It was you always want to manage your expectations. It's not yet a course. It's now kind of the way we're framing it right now is a Q&A session. So I liked what you did which was bound the expectation so you actually are delivering on the promise in terms of it. But I wouldn't get too wrapped around the hashtag right now because finding good hashtags that people use and search for, it's a little bit of an iterative process. I mean,
of course, it is just as long as there is something that we can kind of follow up. That was the main point.
I would just start with something and then track it. And I think you can go ahead and I think there's tools out there that you're able to track hashtag searches. That will give you some metrics to feed back on and see what people are searching for. And you may find out that that's the perfect word combo. But if you find out that it's some other search that people are doing out there, then you say, oh, well, okay, this would be a hotter hashtag. And this is just hashtag management. This is kind of hashtag.
Yeah, this is, totally. But anyway, something that we can kind of follow up and measure and so next step.
Yeah.
I can do a few questions collection things at least right now. Like I was going to do something with OpenAPI anyway next, so I can do that and then put them under which issue.
So I'm a big fan. I see repos as folders and they create nice separations. So I'm gonna go ahead and create I'm gonna call it OpenAPI TV for right now, unless you guys object. No, I don't. That doesn't really. It's the Q&A really is what it is. It's OpenAPI.
It is really that, yeah.
OpenAPI questions. Let's call it questions because we're in the OpenAPI. So I'm just going to start this, just questions. And then let's use make it public. I don't know why it's defaulting to private lately. My GitHub, it's really weird. And then if we could isolate the issues here and just use the issues for this. And then we can create some sort of basic README that outlines the process and the hashtag. And we start with that. And then just start piling on the questions, owning them, answering them, and getting the word out. And and then we can refine and grab, hashtags as they come in and refine the hashtags. We can, create lists of people who are doing them. We can just keep accumulating and working on it from there. But each of us can start answering questions in our own corners.
And I can help out with playing editing games and production games because I have a little bit of a very light background in that space.
Well, it'd be nice to be able to give people feedback on theirs so that they have, if they want it, that we can do a review session and look at some and go, that's really good. That, hey, you could do this and it'd be even better, that kind of stuff.
So we'll just add them into the issues there. Yeah.
Yep. Just add.
And one question per issue,
Yep.
I assume.
Yeah. What is OpenAPI? Well, this has to be the first question. Boom. All right. Yeah. Just start layering in your questions. We'll come up with a labeling taxonomy for how they move forward.
Yeah.
If you create a question, you answer the question, you create a video, one of the things I would like to do is then share what is your process for creating videos. Are you publishing them to YouTube? Are you publishing them only on Twitter? And then share a little bit of that process, and then share the production behind it. And then James and others can come in and help us refine that and get better at it just by sharing.
Yeah, and I think that we could do a few kind of approaches, because there are, of course, many ways of doing videos. I mean, so and we are doing videos in quite many different ways. So then we can, of course, then see what kind of works and what resonates, and then kind of refine. But let's start with this and see where we are.
Yeah, no, I think this is probably one of the better ideas to come out of the discussion, and I think the virality of it and this could lead to curriculum and training and more formal.
Yeah, totally.
I think this is exactly what this group is all about. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
So Ken, are you going to create a channel on YouTube specifically for this in order to kind of create a place to publish them? Or are we having each individual publish their own and then we throw it into the mix? Where are you at on that? This is an open question, not that you can answer now, but
so here's my gut response is, as much as I would love to have them in a central, I think that's a barrier to entry for some. How do I get them there? I would like to encourage people to just use their own process and their own platform.
Okay.
And then one of the things that I think that I could be wrong, but down the road is if, say, you want to remove all your answers. You got out. I've seen this happen in the API space. You burnt out. You left the space. You really don't want to be known as this person. You have that control when you published it to your spaces.
okay, that's a plus minus.
It's a plus minus thing, but hey, diamonds are forever, and videos are just recyclable. But what we can do is that we can at least, for example, collect them into playlists or something, even if they are in different channels. So whoever wants to kind of have that playlist can collect the playlist and have it in their channel, and then that makes it even more visible. So,
and then maybe we'll come up with the metrics. How do we measure this? How do we build the playlist, like you said? And then at some point, we can start creating the formal ones, like, hey, here's the top questions, here's the top answers, here's the top speakers, and then we have the OAI come in with production unit, and we make those formal, and then the IP of those would be owned by the OAI, and those couldn't be removed, and that becomes more formal. Yeah.
Does OAI have do they produce videos currently? Or are we just kind of dealing with a large resource group that you start a tap and you're going to have to make a pitch for money?
Yeah, probably the latter. So,
okay,
but
fair enough.
But with that said, there's also the Linux Foundation has video production groups, so it might just be a matter of the OAI just tapping that with some OAI money. So
because that level of expertise coming in, folks that have been doing it for a little while, because at the end of the day, they're gonna have to pay some bucks for this, and that's going to become a line item. Just that, it will create certain dynamics, and anytime you move forward with regard to that, I kind of believe in the concept of the power of between 2 to 5 people to do amazing things without getting into the world of formally asking for funds. I mean, we do this in the startup world all the time. This happens in video all the time, meaning hack through as best you can. And the nature of the tools right now are so freaking amazing in the video space, for example. And we talk about development tools, but in that space is actually incredible what tools are available in terms of putting together fairly decent quality productions. And I would encourage you to move forward and fast and iterate many times before you start going into a formal process of asking for monies. Usually,
but the main point is actually that we were trying to find a loophole to take us away from the kind of official things, because there was also a kind of, in the previous discussions, there was a problem, which was that if we started planning a formal training and certification first, then we would kind of run into the Linux Foundation like directly, because they would be then doing that, and then that was kind of eating away the motivation from all of us others, and especially those who are not necessarily foundation members, that why should we then bother doing anything, because it will be taken away. So
back to the power of 2 or the power of 3 people, 4 people, 5 people to be able to go and create something new and amazing. You have all the talent within the pool right here. I mean, the fact that you have 2 master trainers on this team, and that your technical depth is huge. So the thing is, those are great combinations in order to get started with regard to just being able to go ahead and produce something before you ask the question of looking for dollars. Because looking for dollars, all that means is formally paying people in order to do the presentation, the editing, the videography, and things like that. And I'm not convinced that it's really kind of worth the trouble sometimes. I think you can build the artifacts and build a thread, and you always want to figure out what succeeds before you formalize it. Otherwise, what you do is, especially if you think of this terms of iterative development for a product, you don't necessarily know what the product is. The product is a journey. So the production of these videos, perceive them as a journey, not an endpoint in themselves. And in that journey, you're going to discover what works, which is what are customers actually going to uptick, what personas are actually going to go ahead and engage with regard to those, and that's going to be discovered over time.
And I think it's like Maruka said that we don't know what's going to interest people. What is it going to be entertainment? Is it going to in certain personalities, like in the Postman environment, we have an ambassador or champion, Valentine, who does how-to videos. They've become our #1 videos over our internal ones because he's a personality. And so how do we, and to use your language, James, how do we do this by fire and chaos? And I think the kiln-dried nature of the process that comes out of that, then we can take that to the OAI. I can work to get budget, but let's do the chaos first.
Yep.
But this is just to frame it a little bit. This is not just making stuff up and going with the gut. What you have is people within your team that actually have depth of skill and expertise, and they're going to naturally, like Jeremy's experience with regard to teaching product management, he's going to walk up with a series of product management capabilities and tools that come from the fact that he's taught the classes for years and years and years. And Marika is going to sit there and says, I've taught this class for many, many years. I know kind of intuitively as an expert what works in this space. So it's not quite, I mean, to frame it as chaos, but it's create chaos among folks.
Controlled chaos. managed care. So I think that it's going to be just fine. And I love that we have so many people who kind of think and breathe in a kind of product management way, because ultimately this is a product that we are doing, even though it's just a hint of a product and we don't yet exactly know what the product will be, except like we know the kind of vision of that. But yeah, I agree. This is going to be a very interesting exercise.
Good. Well, let's start piling on
Yeah,
some questions. I'll just do a
exactly.
simple README kind of outlining the process because I would like to get some other folks involved that are
Yeah,
just like us. And let's see what we can make happen.
yeah, great. Let's
Great
get
guy.
going.
I'm going to drop off now. I have a tree crew taking down some giant oaks. I want to take a look at what's going on in my backyard.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, I'm going to drop off too.
I got
I'll Slack you, Dave, some stuff. Bye.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks a
y'all.
lot. Take care.
I'm going to just linger because that's what I do.
Okay, Ken, I think I'm going to drop off too. This has been really helpful.
Yeah, no, thanks for you guys for joining. I'm going to just keep working and hope to see you next week, Dave.
Yeah, likewise. Hey, by the way, did you say you record these things?
I do, and I publish them to the README for the homepage.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, because I missed part of this, and I might want to go back if I have time and listen to a bit more. But I hope I can contribute. This time slot really kind of bites for me, but I can listen. I just can't really contribute much because I do the morning care for my kids until my wife gets up around 9. So
no worries. Feel free to contribute, even if there's kids in the background. I don't, but yeah, that's why we make sure there's video so you can follow up later and then asynchronously through the GitHub issues. So
yeah, well, I hope to help out in that as well. I need to go back and look at what is required,
but I think the challenge for us and Maruka really, this idea kind of reflects that is how do we find little bite-sized things that all of us busy people can actually really do, so.
Yeah, I do think that I mentioned this before, and maybe this is just my own bias, but for someone who's trying to understand the value of OpenAPI, I think those killer use cases have to be found. And like the one thought that I had, which I would have shared earlier if I was able to speak more, was that when you standardize something, it gives you less surface area for attack for like security type purposes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know how. I haven't heard that brought up so much. I don't know if maybe I just missed it, but that seems like that's where I'm coming from with traceable, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm thinking that might be the angle where I contribute is look at the benefit of doing it in a consistent way that others have done. Is that you get less attack surface.
Well, for me, like what you guys represent is very much, it's not just security, it's knowing, it's discovery, it's knowing what the surface area is, because you can't defend what you don't know. And so there's many layers to that onion that you guys provide. And then, you get all the way into, well, when something does happen, how do we understand what happened? There's levels of awareness, discovery, and then, yes, security. And so there's definitely some areas I would love to dive into that. I have lots of thoughts and opinions because every organization I go to, they don't even know where all their APIs are. So thus, they don't know their entire attack surface area. And this OpenAPI very much helps in this discussion.
Yeah, I think so. I need to learn. I need to learn a little bit more about Postman. I kind of know what it does as far as helping you create the APIs, I think. But I don't really know how it differentiates from other solutions. So I have to go figure that out. But I was wondering, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you need a one-on-one demo, just ping me at ken.lane@postman, and I'm happy to set up a half hour and run you through.
Okay, cool. That would be very helpful. And then just at the, maybe we'll do that because at the high level, uh, I'm starting to get a sense for how we can be a part of the OpenAPI message because of the security angle and the discovery angle too. I was kind of lingering around, just lurking because I thought, I know your past and I have an API history, and I thought, well, at the very minimum, it'll be interesting because we're all about APIs. But I thought maybe I'll find an angle here to participate in something that I think should grow, and so, and then looking at the different companies around it, I'm hoping to also kind of build out my knowledge of the ecosystem. So, because I'm kind of returning back to the API space, I guess. So anyway, all I'm saying is that I think the lurking is paying off because I'm starting to figure out that this is something that's useful and valuable to us.
Well, I would say, grab 30 minutes or an hour with me directly, and we can approach this under the context of like kind of a Postman partnership intro session is because the reason why I'm doing a lot of this mapping out of the OpenAPI ecosystem is because Postman has become this API lifecycle tool, and we want to service every stop along the API lifecycle, but we don't want to do all of them, and we need partners to do that. So when it comes to security, traceability, discovery, we need you. We need to understand and help you map that fit. And it's not just a Postman fit; it's a OpenAPI wider lifecycle fit. And so I can totally help you think through that, map that, and then out of the other end, you can be contributing to this group more. But then we can also find a way that in the Postman ecosystem that we can make some magic happen.
Love it. Love the magic.
Yeah, grab.
Also, what time zone are you? Are you California? Where are you based?
I'm California.
Okay. Yeah, I'll ping you sometime next week. Is there a time frame that works best for you, like that parts of the day?
Usually, early in the week and early in the day are always the busiest. So later in the week, later in the day are the most open for me.
It's the same thing. Okay, good. I'll ping some time.
Cool.
Fun.
Yeah, look forward to it.
I like it. All right, thanks a lot.
All right, have a good one, Dave. Cheers.